Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Paul O'Neill, and on behalf of Kingston's Buried Treasures, I'd like to welcome you to this month's presentation of our lecture series. The subject being one integral to our community from the very start, the education of Kingston. In fact, among the conditions that were laid down in Holland to the directors of the West India Company prior to granting permission to colonize the New Netherlands was the requirement that any settlement, and I quote, shall provisionally provide and pay the salary of a minister and schoolmaster. So from the very start, education has played a critical role in our history. And in 2015, Kingston High School is going to be celebrating a very special milestone. It's going to be a centennial at the forefront of the education of our youth. And we are very fortunate tonight to have as our special presenter Anna Brett. And I'm sure most of you know Anna or you know of Anna. Anna has been a longtime Kingston educator and community volunteer. Among her many hats that she wears, she's currently the president of the Kingston, the Junior League of Kingston. She's a member of the board of directors for the Friends of Historic Kingston, and she's also a trustee at SUNY Ulster. Not only that, she just finished serving as the Grand Marshal of the Snowflake Festival last Friday. So Anna is truly one of the special people in our community that make this such a special community. And as a result of her lifetime spent in the Kingston school system, she's the perfect presenter for this subject. So it is a great honor to introduce to you tonight's special presenter, Anna Brett.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. I think you were supposed to tell these people that they're not supposed to shout out tonight. Is that correct?
I think that everybody is well aware that, again, if we could hold the questions until the end, and I will bring the microphone to you so that we can catch all the questions, and Anna will answer any question you could ever have about Kingston High School.
Because I said to Paul as I was preparing my presentation for tonight, is that I'm not the expert on Kingston High School. I was there for 24 years and educated for 35 years, but I certainly don't know everything. And I thought there are probably many of you out there that are alumni of Kingston High School that probably know a lot of things more than I do. So I wanted you to just to chime right in, and he said, oh, no, not here, we do not do that. So I guess I'm back in school telling you to be quiet. But just to tell you a little bit more about myself before I get into the presentation, I did work for Kingston City Schools for 35 years. 24 of them were spent at Kingston High School. I began in 1973 as a health teacher, and in 1984 I moved on to Dean of Students. I joined the KHS administration, and then in 1988 I became assistant principal. After that, I was very fortunate to be given the opportunity to go to the elementary level, and in 1997, I moved to Chambers School, where I was principal for the remaining 13 years of my career. So it's really been a wonderful, wonderful experience for me. I can't say enough about Kingston City Schools and the opportunities they have given me over the years, and I'm very glad to be doing this presentation tonight. But again, just to remind you, I'm not the expert, so be thinking about things you want to add at the end. Before I get to the presentation, I have a commercial. Kingston High School is celebrating its 100th anniversary, and we will be celebrating it in the spring of 2015. Paul said 2016, but it's actually 2015 that we'll have this celebration. And we have a series of events that we're going to have, and I'd like to tell you about them so that maybe some of you will join us. First of all, we started out, we already had a couple of events. On the first day of school, we reenacted the first day of school that happened in 1915. And we marched up Broadway, and we had all kinds of alumni. We had all the Kingston High School seniors, the marching band, and we came to the front of the school, and the principal came out, and the superintendent was there. We had a great celebration. And in 1915, that's exactly what they did on the opening day of school. So it was really a lot of fun to get the kids involved with that and to have them be a part of this whole thing. Then we participated in the homecoming parade in October. We had floats for various alumni groups, and we marched, and it was a great way to celebrate the alumni of Kingston High School. But in April of 2015, on April 18th, which is a Saturday, we will have a celebration at the high school. It will be a museum walk. We've been working on gathering all kinds of archives and materials to present to people. We will have people there that will be telling us a little bit about Kingston High School. We'll also have a brunch, so if you come, you'll get food also. And then in the evening, we'll have a cocktail party at the Hillside Manor for anybody that would like to come to that. And the next day, which I'm really kind of excited about, we're going to have a movement program at Dietz Stadium. And the fellow from the Creative Education, Center for Creative Education, is going to be doing dances throughout the decades. So he's going to start with 1915 and the dances of that and go right up to the present day so that everybody could participate, and it'll be held on the field of Dietz Stadium. So hopefully maybe some of you might be able to join us for that. So we have a lot of things planned. Okay, tonight, Kingston High School. This is the photograph from the opening day on September 7th, 1915. On this day, some 800 students paraded up Broadway to the new KHS building. The students were very apprehensive because many of you might not know, but Kingston Academy, students were coming from Kingston Academy and Ulster Academy, and they were arch rivals. So coming together to a new place where everybody was going to be together, they were very apprehensive about what was going to happen. Nothing happened. It was a great day. They all kind of celebrated the idea that they were in this new building, which was really very exciting. They were also amazed about the size of the building. If any of you have seen photographs of the Kingston Academy or Ulster Academy, they were very small. And this was huge compared to what they were used to. Besides that, it had a basement, it had lockers, everyone was going to have their own locker. They had a cafeteria, which was very unusual, that you could buy a full lunch for 25 cents. The auditorium seated every single student in the school. So the auditorium was able to seat everybody. They had an electronic bell system, which signaled the beginning of class and the end of class. And they had study halls, which many of you might recall. They had study hall A for the boys and study hall B for the girls. So they were not allowed to mingle. They were not allowed to socialize. And they had a very nice library, which I'll have some photographs later on. The curriculum was extensive. By the way, this is our Kingston High School faculty. And the curriculum was very extensive. They had all the general subjects of math, science, social studies, and English, but they also had shop, business, cooking and sewing, art and design, and physical education. So it really covered a very large curriculum. They had daily assemblies. Fred Van Etten, and I don't know if that's a name that anybody recognizes, would play the piano in the morning. Everyone would gather in the auditorium, and they would sing old songs for about a half an hour, and then everybody would go to class. When you think about it, what a great way to start the day. The students loved it, and it was really a great way to experience it. The sports program, there were few sports offered at the time, baseball, basketball, and football, and the girls had a basketball team. And as some things change, some things don't, the rival at that time was Newburgh Free Academy. So in 1915, they were rivals. They continue to be rivals today. There were many clubs also at this time. There was a debating team, Prisma, which was a service organization. There were theater groups. There was the Maroon, and there was May Day. So all of these took place even in 1915. In 1917, the Kingston High School alma mater was written by Olga Van Slyke Owens, a junior at Kingston High School, and the music was composed by Miriam Pitts, who was a sophomore at Kingston High School. They got together, did this song, this alma mater, which is still part of the system today. So I think that is really a wonderful thing that two students put it together, and it still exists today. The school had 800 students and 29 faculty members, and it was grades 10 through 12 at the time. In 1921, the freshmen joined us. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the Kingston High School administration. And you'll see we went through a lot of changes throughout the years. The very first principal was Mr. Charles Malton. he was a former principal of Kingston Academy, and then he served as principal of Kingston High School from 1915 to 1917. The superintendent was Myron J. Michael. And unfortunately, when I was looking for a picture of Mr. Moulton, the only thing they had was a drawing of him. So this is a drawing that I found, and I kind of felt bad because I don't know if that's what he looked like or not, but maybe he was camera shy, but there was never a picture in any of the books that I could find of Mr. Moulton. After him came Mr. Charles Lewis, who was then principal from 1917 to 1924. Our next principal was and he was a doctor, Dr. B.C. Van Ingen, from 1924 to 1932. And he worked with Kate Walton and Theron Culver, which some of you might recognize those names. Was that a grumble? No, but that was, uh-oh. After them, yes, 1932 to 1950, which was a very long time. He was one of the longest running principals. And it was Clarence Doom. We did not call him Mr. Dumb, even though I'm sure there were some students that took liberty. But Mr. Doom was principal for quite a long time, and he was known to be a very, very strict disciplinarian. I guess he was a real tough guy. So that was Mr. Doom. Our next principal was John Henry Martin, and he was principal from 1950 to 1953. And at that time was the first time they introduced a vice principal. The population was growing. It became a little bit difficult for one person to run the building, so they included a vice principal. Also at that time, they introduced a woman by the name of Virginia Norwood, and perhaps some of you know that name. But Virginia Norwood was an advisor. That's what they called her. But in reality, she really was a dean of girls. And in all the yearbooks, all I could read about was that she was in charge of attendance. She took care of absenteeism, academics, only with the girls, though. So it was Theron Culver as vice principal that took care of the boys. So that was during that time. And also during this time, MJM was built in 1939. And Frank L. Mahar was the first principal of MJM. It was not a part of the Kingston High School campus at the time. They kept the freshmen there for a long time. But he was, I'm sure you know the name Mahar because one of the elementary schools was named after him. So he was the principal there. Moving on, from 55 to 63, another name that you recognize, M. Clifford Miller. He became principal. And during that time, Theron Culver served as VP for a while, and then he retired, and then J. Watson Bailey became the VP. So there's our two now middle schools. They worked together during that time. Unfortunately, Mr. Bailey had a very untimely death in 1960. He was very young and he died. And so Clifford Miller was left to be principal for a while on his own until they moved up the administrative intern into the VP spot. And that person was Dan H. Allen. And he became the VP in 1960 after Mr. Bailey's death. And then we move on to the Kingston High School administration that went for a very long time, 20 years. Dan Allen as principal, William Scafidi as vice principal, and Flo Bruckert became the dean of girls. And I think many of you that maybe are alumni might have some stories of Mrs. Bruckert. I guess she was a very tough lady. And I'm looking at that picture, she kind of scares me, but she was the dean of girls. And again, they only had a dean of girls. The VP took care of the boys in terms of discipline. So it was a very different time in history. And also one thing I noticed as I was going through all these pictures, so interesting to see how they posed. Everyone's always sitting at the desk with the telephone in their ear. It's very funny just how they all felt that that was the most comfortable way to be photographed. After Mr. Allen retired in 1983, Joseph Bonita became principal. He was the director of science and health, and he moved into that spot. And Mr. Gudemote, who was one of the music teachers, became his VP after Mr. Scafidi retired. So they were together from 1983 to 1988. Also during that time, we had a dean of boys that moved in and a dean of girls. And that was Carlton Bell, became dean of boys. Actually, he started in 1971. And Pauline Johnson became dean of girls, first African-American administrator in the Kingston City School District. Then we move on to Doug Gudemote. In 1988, Joe moved on to bigger and better things, and Doug became principal. William Diedrich, who was a science teacher at Kingston High School, became his VP. Also at the time, this is a very important part during the history, is that we changed back again from a 10 through 12 campus to a 9 through 12 campus. So the ninth graders came back in 1988, and that was a very big deal because we were not used to having ninth graders on our campus for over 30 years, and now they were coming back. And the middle school, then it became the middle school concept of 6th, 7th, and 8th. So the 6th graders went up to the middle school, 9th graders came up to the high school. So in regards to that, we went from deans to assistant principals. And the 4 assistant principals were Carlton Bell, Anna Brett, Donna Elberg, and Anthony Arena. And we were all, most of us teachers at Kingston High School before we got these jobs. So it was a very big time in history in terms of things that happened. Doug Gudemote became superintendent in 1995. And so we had another change. And unfortunately, I couldn't find a picture of David Church, but David Church, Dr. David Church, became our principal, and the vice principal was William Diedrich. And so they lasted together for 3 years. Then Dr. Church moved on to the alternative school at Kingston High School, and Dr. Diedrich became principal. And it was a very difficult time for the high school at that time, and he did not have a VP. He only worked with the 4 assistant principals, so that was kind of tough on him to do that. And then we had many changes after this. In 1999, we had a fellow by the name of Tom Jackson, who blew in from California and blew out very quickly too. And he was kind of an interesting fellow. And his VP was Dennis Murphy, who came from Pennsylvania, who came up and became our new VP. So we had a lot of changes, a lot of people coming from the outside, which was very unusual for Kingston City Schools. They always like to hire from within. But this was a time when they decided to start looking elsewhere. And so Dennis Murphy, then when Tom Jackson blew out, Dennis Murphy moved up to the principalship. And Joseph Stoutenberg, who was principal at Crosby Elementary School, became our new VP. Dennis Murphy remained, and he had a new vice principal by the name of Nick Dino, who was there 1 year, I believe, 1 or 2 years, and then he went elsewhere. So we had a lot of changes in a 10-year time span, which made it very difficult for working at Kingston High School. Finally, in 2003, our first female principal, Marie Anderson. She came from across the river, and actually she started at Coleman High School as a chemistry teacher, then went across the river as an administrator, and then came to Kingston High School as the first female principal. And her VP was Barbara McGrath, who was a special ed person, who moved into that. She was assistant principal for a while and then became vice principal. So it was a very exciting time. And then Marie went to Crosby Elementary School and still is there as principal. And Adrian Manuel became principal in 2011. And the wonderful part about Adrian, not only was he a minority person, but also he went to Kingston High School. He graduated in 1996. So it was the first time we had a student become a principal. So that was really wonderful for us. And Andy Schieber was made vice principal. He was on the teaching staff. Then Mr. Manuel felt it was time for him to move on, and he went to Washington, D.C. to work in the charter school system. And Kirk Reinhardt came along, and Kirk was a physics teacher at Kingston High School, then became director of math and science, and then last year, or actually this year, this summer, he was made principal of Kingston High School. Another former student, 1982, class of 1982. And Andy Schieber remained on as vice principal. So that's our many changes that took place over the years. And now I'd like to talk about the buildings, the expansions, how we started with one building and then started to grow with many other buildings. This is a picture of Myron J. Michael High School that was built in 1937. And it was primarily a junior high school until it became part of the high school in 1988. And it's part of the plan next year when they begin the new expansion that they're going to tear down MJM. So that will be too bad because it was a very beautiful building, but it really needs a lot of work, so maybe it's time. Our Kingston secondary schools, in the middle, of course, we see Kingston High School, and then you see Ulster Academy, Kingston Academy, Pankaki Free Academy. These were all schools that eventually fed into the high school. And that was on opening day. The middle picture of the high school is opening day. And Kingston High School has transformed over the years. This is a beautiful picture of the front steps and the wonderful lights that were there at the time and the columns. And then inside, we had the beautiful main hall that leads into the auditorium. That does not look like that now. If anybody went up to Kingston High School, it's really changed dramatically. But that was our main hall. This is an aerial view. And this one, it must have been taken from City Hall. That's the only thing I could imagine. It looks like it's coming down from the top of City Hall. And I thought it was a really beautiful shot. The main stairways, in the middle of, as you walk into the main door, they were all marble stairs, and the marble was removed in 1988 when they did the reconstruction. So they were quite beautiful, but they were wearing, what was happening, they were wearing a lot, and they became very slippery. The Kingston High School auditorium, as it looked at the very beginning, and has now gone through a renovation. So that was part of the campus. And then also upstairs on the second floor and the main hallway again. But the upstairs, you could see where the stained glass windows were that were overlooking the auditorium. So they were really beautiful. But they were all removed. They're hoping to reinstall some of this in the reconstruction when they go through the next renovation. But at that time, that's what they look like. And then what the Kingston High School library looked like at the time, which is very different from what we expect now. Okay, moving right along. One of the additions to the Kingston High School done in 1929 was called the Manual Training Building. Many of you probably know it as the Vocational Building. And then eventually it was renamed in 1978 the Richard Whiston Building, which was named after Dick Whiston, who was a science teacher who worked in that building. And when it was first built, they had homemaking, chemistry labs, auto mechanic shops, electrical shops, agriculture courses, all kinds of things. It was a variety of courses. So it really was quite a place. In 1957, they added on to the front of the building that is the closest to Broadway, and that was offices at the time until 1978. Then it became the Tobin Learning Center. And it was named after James Tobin, who was the pupil personnel. He was in charge of pupil personnel. So, and that remains. But again, with the new renovation in a couple of years, that's going to change too. And here we have the Kate Walton Fieldhouse, which was built in 1950. And the addition that was put on to that was in 1979, actually took a whole year to get done, was the pool. And that is still in existence, of course, and is at the kind of the far end of the building closest to Broadway. If many of you recall, during the 50s, IBM came to Kingston during the 50s and 60s, and that caused a major problem for Kingston City Schools in terms of rooms and space. And so at that time, that's when they built the two junior high schools. In 1962, J. Watson Bailey was built, and in 1968, M. Clifford Miller opened up. And that alleviated some of the crowding at Kingston High School because the ninth graders went back and were there. So it kind of changed the whole demeanor of everything. Then in 1978 to 1980, we had our major reconstruction of Kingston High School. And probably a lot of you might remember this. I remember it all too well because we were right in the middle of it. And I have a funny story to tell about this because when I first came to Kingston in 1973 and interviewed for my job, I interviewed with George Washburn, who was the assistant superintendent for secondary education. And he told me he kind of walked me back into his office and he said, "Miss Palazzo, I'm going to show you something that you're going to really be very proud of." So he took away this curtain, and there was this beautiful drawing of a high school, of a new high school. And he said, "That's the place you're going to be working in." I said, "Woohoo, great, I come up to Kingston, I'm going to be in a new building, this is great stuff." And of course, that never happened. And if some of you recall, at that point in history, the Board of Education changed, and we had the group known as WITA. We had it, Taxpayers Association. They came into being, and they said, "No way are we putting up a new high school. So come up with another plan." So what they came up with was to build onto Kingston High School property. And unfortunately, they did it during the school year when everybody was in session, when students, faculty, everybody was in session. So we were in the middle of this, and it was a very tumultuous time for all of us. I remember wearing a mask and having my students wear masks because I was afraid of all the smoke and all the dust and everything that was blowing around my classroom. And it wasn't unusual to look out your window and see a worker out there doing something, you know. So it was really a very tough time to teach. There were walkouts. The students did a walkout. They all went out to the major hill where the Salzman building is now, and it was really a very difficult time. But we got through it, and I still have my T-shirt that says I survived the reconstruction. So we did get through it. Okay. Then a couple of other things have happened recently. In 2010, the auditorium was renovated. And I have not seen this yet. I haven't actually gone inside, but it looks beautiful. They put in all new ceilings and walls and all new chairs, seats for everyone, and the balcony was all redone. It looks phenomenal. And if any of you have been to any of the plays or musicals, perhaps you have experienced the beauty of this new auditorium. So that was done. And also in 2012, they renovated Carnegie Library, which is located right next door to Kingston High School. And we used it many, many years ago for classes, and then it kind of was left to seed. And then they decided to redo it again, and it is a beautiful, beautiful building. Right now, BOCES runs programs through it, but they hope to have more Kingston High School programs happening there. So that's our Carnegie building. Okay, now I'm going to move on to Kingston High School and activities and organizations and clubs. Over the years, there have been many, many activities and clubs and organizations. Students had all kinds of opportunities to participate in many different aspects of Kingston High School. And they had many events, and it was just a great place to be for many people. And the Maroon and May Day were the only two events or activities that lasted the 100 years. They still exist, the Maroon being the yearbook, and May Day, of course, being the celebration of May. And that's the first May Day. It was on the steps of Kingston High School. They had a parade. They had a big celebration, the band, everybody was present. And then they gave out varsity letters, and they also gave recognition to various students that had done well in various activities and academics. So it was quite a thing. And that was the first staff of the Maroon. And that just shows you the Maroon staff there, some of the people that were directly involved, and one of our May Queens. And till this day, we still celebrate May Day. It's gone through many changes over the years in terms of timing, whether to have it in the morning, the afternoon, what students need to do. Of course, for a while there was a day where kids took off and had their own May Day celebrations. But it's still a very important time for students to be recognized by their fellow students. So I still think it's something we should still celebrate. And by the way, the first queen, which that's not her, was Hazel Toole. And she was the very first May Queen. In 1916, they had 10 clubs and organizations. Now at Kingston High School, they have over 60. So it really has grown tremendously over the years. One of such activity was the Dame Rumor. And for those of you that do not know, they did not have a school newspaper until 1932. Kingston Academy and Ulster Academy both had publications, but when they merged, nobody wanted to take it over and start their own newspaper. So in 1932, a person that probably some of you might recognize the name, Agnes Scott Smith, said, we're going to have a newspaper. And she did. And she got it together with Mr. Doom, and they formed this first publication. And that was in 1932. And the wonderful thing, as I'm reading about this, the first one they gave out free. Then after that, they charged the students for a subscription to the newspaper. I don't know how much it was, maybe Ed, maybe you know, but I don't know how much it was, but they charged the students to pay for the school newspaper, and everybody subscribed. So it was a wonderful thing. It made money for the organization. During World War II, Agnes Scott Smith sent copies of the newspaper to over 300 military people. She felt it was important for them to read about Kingston High School while they were overseas. So I thought that was a really wonderful thing for her to do. In 1979, Dame Rumor changed its name. At that time, there was much discussion about the significance of Dame Rumor, and so they felt it was a little sexist at the time, and so it became the Kingston High School Highlights. So that was in 1979. In 1939, we had the first National Honor Society formed at Kingston High School. There was, in years past, what was called the Magna Cum Laude Club, and that was all students that did very well academically, and they were recognized for that. But then they wanted to start their own chapter of the National Honor Society. So in 1939, they did, and it was a group of students that actually started it. And they actually still, at that time, the 4 qualities of the National Honor Society, which include scholarship, service, leadership, and character, were used then, are still used to this day, to get into the National Honor Society. The students chose the name of the Manning chapter of the National Honor Society, named after Henrietta L. Manning, who was a teacher at Kingston High School, a Latin teacher that they greatly admired, and they still carry that name till today. It's still called the Henrietta L. Manning National Honor Society. So those are activities throughout the years. And then we have, I just kind of took pictures, random pictures of other activities. As we go along, I just wrote down some of the ones that changed. But in the early clubs, we had the Prisma, the Debating Club, the Conservation Club, Newman Club, which I thought was interesting, Hiking Club, Stamp Club, Camera Club, Gym Club, Radio Club, Future Farmers of America, Future Homemakers of America, Future Nurses of America, Future Teachers of America, Key Club, Ski Club, Library Council, and then as we get more into the 70s, 80s, and 90s, we had the Chess Club, Harvard Model UN, Leo Club, DECA, which was part of the distributive education program, Math Team, Science Olympiads, Art Club, Film Club, Diversity Club, Youth Court, KHS TV, AIDS Task Force, Fencing Club, and most recently, which I thought this was kind of funny, some of them, Frisbee Club, Sign Language Club, which I thought was very nice, Bible Club, they kind of brought back that, Gay Straight Alliance, and the Fabulous and Thick Club, which their acronym is FAT. So what it stands for is about body image, and girls have trouble with body image, and what they do is they get together and they talk about why it's important to really feel good about yourself, and they call themselves Fabulous and Thick. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So, and those are some other activities, of course, all the music, the band, choir, and all of that stuff. Okay, Kingston High School sports. As I mentioned at the very beginning, sports were a big part of Kingston High School, and over the years, they've really grown tremendously with the number of sports that are offered to students. And here we have some sports in 1916. Look at these teams. The basketball team on your left and the baseball team on your right. They had very nice uniforms, so. And they had one girls' team. It was a girls' basketball team. And I don't know how they played in those outfits, I really don't, but that was what they had to wear. And I'm not sure what that is on their head. Some kind of, it looks like a turban of some sort of thing. I don't think it's a helmet, so. But the girls' sports were not very popular. And what happened is they had this basketball team in 1916, and then it just died away. The girls wouldn't come out for sports. They just didn't think it was, I guess, that wasn't acceptable for them at that time in history. And so they were really limited. And as time went on in the 20s and 30s, basketball became more popular, and then bowling. And those were the only two sports that the girls played. They didn't play anything else. It wasn't until the 1960s that they actually started to expand the girls' athletic program. So it really took a while for them to, really get into this. But they did have a leaders club, and those girls had little white uniforms, and they helped in the gym classes, but they would play one day a year. They would challenge St. Ursula's Academy in basketball. So they would pick a group, and they would go down there and play. Later on, after 1971, we had the introduction of volleyball and softball, basketball, track, tennis, gymnastics, and ski team. In 1971, girls were allowed to join the boys' swim team. That was the first in the history of Kingston High School. There was only the boys' swim team. The girls wanted to participate, so they allowed it in 1971. And then in 1980, when we did build the pool, the girls had their own swim team. So it took a while, but they were able to do it. Okay, and finally in the boys, now the girls have 16 athletic teams. Everything from volleyball, softball, field hockey, lacrosse, to crew. They just added crew a couple of years ago. The boys' sports have been much more, or have been around for a longer time. That started in 1916. But track and cross country became part of the system after baseball, basketball, and football. 1932, tennis came into being. 1934, golf came into being. And in 1939, swimming came as a team. And they used to go down to the YMCA and swim at the YMCA. That was their practice place before our pool was built. Today, there are 18 athletic teams for boys, and of course, the crew being the most recent. They have won many titles over the years, and they've had some very, very successful athletics, and many students that have gone on to professional athletic events. So it's been a wonderful thing for Kingston High School. Okay, now, finally, it was very difficult for me to think about who I wanted to pick out and talk about in terms of familiar faces in Kingston High School, and I didn't want to make it too lengthy, so I just picked a few, but I thought maybe these might be some that might be of interest to you. First of all, we have Myron J. Michael, and Myron J. Michael was a very respected teacher and administrator. In 1867, he attended the military school in Fort Plain, New York, which was a prep school. And other students that attended this prep school were Clara Barton and Grover Cleveland. So he was amongst some very famous people. In 1875, he graduated from Tufts College, eventually earning his PhD, which at that time in history was very unusual for people to earn their PhDs. He served as superintendent of schools in Rome, New York, and then he came to Kingston in 1893. He was principal of Kingston Academy from 1893 to 1900, and then he became superintendent of schools in Kingston in 1900. So he had quite a background, and all that I could read as I read through many different maroons was that everybody loved this man. He was just like the nicest person, and also a very bright person, and did a lot for Kingston City Schools. So Myron J. Michael, it was very good that they named a school after you, but don't tell them they're going to tear it down, so. The person in the middle is Kate Walton Fieldhouse. She was a math teacher, and she was there in 1916, so she was one of the first faculty members. She was a tough cookie, according to what I've read. She reigned over study halls, and she served as attendance record keeper and the school disciplinarian. She handed out the detention. She was in charge of detention. And she was very much into people following the rules. So if you didn't follow the rules, you ended up with detention. And she would keep students till 5 o'clock at night, which now would be, you couldn't do that. That would be a no-no. So, but she felt that, if you break the rule, you got to stay. And so she was very, very strict about that. She also was very well respected, even though she was tough, but people liked her because she was fair and she was consistent. And they thought that that was really nice. She had no favorites. There were no favorites in her book. And so they named the field house after her, the Kate Walton Field House. But she taught math. I thought maybe she was a phys ed teacher, but she taught math, algebra and trigonometry. And the last man on the right is Warren Caius, who was the first athletic director for Kingston High School. And he served from 1946 to 1964. And since then, we've only had 4 other athletic directors, which is interesting that there were very few of them. We've had William Burke was right after him. Then it was Bill Hurley, Tony Bottolato, and presently we have Glenn Maish. So he was there for quite a while. And according to all the sports records, Warren Caius had the most wins out of any coach in the history of Kingston High School. He had 15 basketball championships, 5 baseball titles, 2 football crowns, and many track and field accomplishments. So he was very well known and, again, very well respected by all who knew him. Now, Ed. I thought, why not throw up this? I knew Ed would be here tonight, so I looked up you in the yearbook, 1936, and look at you, you're a handsome guy. Yeah. And Ed Ford is our historian, and he was quite a person in high school. And that's his brother, William Ford, right next to him, who I guess the way that it reads next to his picture, he's quite a ladies' man, Bill Ford. So unfortunately, he's not here with us tonight. So those are the Ford brothers. William is much younger. 1941 he graduated. Ed Ford was in 1936. So those are our local people. Then we had 3, but I know that Paul O'Neill told me we had 4 people that were generals. I only could find 3. So I'm missing somebody, so maybe Paul could help me with this. But the 3 that I found that were generals in the U.S. Army, Sherman Hasbrook on the left, Edwin Messenger in the center, and Fred Anderson on the right. They all graduated from Kingston High School. And let me tell you a little bit about each of them, because I think it's really interesting. Sherman Hasbrook was president of the class of 1916 at Kingston High School. He was also a member of the debating club. He was a star football player. He starred in all the productions, all the theater productions. So of course you knew he had to go to West Point. He had all the qualifications of that. So he entered West Point in 1918 and graduated as a second lieutenant of infantry in 1920. During World War II, Hasbrook was commanding general of the 97th Infantry Division Artillery in the U.S., Europe, and the Pacific. In his 37-year military career, he was awarded numerous medals for bravery, Legion of Merit, and the Bronze Star. He died in 2002 at the age of 103. So all that military stuff kept him going. Yep. And as a matter of fact, when we celebrated the 1990, the 75th anniversary of Kingston High School, Sherman Hasbrook came, and he spoke at graduation. So it was really nice to have him there, for him to come back to Kingston High School. Edwin Messenger in the middle, he was from the class of 1924. He was an All-American football player at KHS. He graduated from West Point in 1931. He was Lieutenant General Messenger, who served in several combat missions in Korea and was the commanding officer of the 9th Infantry Regiment, 2nd Infantry Division. During his military career, he earned the Distinguished Service Cross twice, the Army Distinguished Service Medal, and the Silver Star twice, and he retired as a U.S. Army Lieutenant General. And he died in 1965. The last fellow is Frederick Anderson, who was from the class of 1923. He was born in Kingston in 1905. He graduated from West Point in 1928. He was commissioned as second lieutenant in 1928 and advanced to major general in 1943. During World War II, he was sent to England and served as deputy director of bombardment. He was a commanding general. He was in England until 1943 and then came back to the United States in 1944 to 45. He later served as the United States ambassador to NATO. His medals and decorations include Silver Star, Distinguished Flying Cross, Distinguished Service Medal, the Air Medal, the Legion of Merit, and the Legion of Honor. He died in 1969 and is buried in Arlington Cemetery. So some of you might be able to see him in Arlington Cemetery if you go visit. Okay, so those are some of our familiar faces. Okay, finally, I can take a break here before I continue. Without a doubt, a discussion about Kingston High School cannot leave out the wall, the famous wall, because it's been there since the very beginning and it has gone through many changes over the years. The wall marks the northern perimeter of the school and marks the jurisdiction of school property, which has meant many different things to many generations. In 1898, at the conclusion of the Spanish-American War, citizens sat on the wall to cheer returning veterans. At that time, it was 15 feet tall and served as a retaining wall to keep rocks from falling onto Broadway. It was the edge of the O'Reilly Woods. For those of you that remember that, that was before Kingston High School was built. As soon as KHS opened in 1916, students claimed the wall as their own. It was considered public property, and that was a debate, often between administration and teachers and students about what was public property and what was school property. And the behavior that was not allowed on the KHS side was allowed in front of the wall. It represented freedom, a place to socialize, eat lunch, and get away from the school atmosphere. In the 30s, boys and girls had separate classes, so the wall provided a time to socialize. In the 1950s, not only did they socialize, but they also smoked cigarettes. So that became a big issue down there. In the 60s, there were smokers of a different variety. And the wall became a very dangerous place, a very lawless place. In the 70s through the 90s, many parents would call me, and at that point, that's when I was an administrator, telling me, you have to keep my child off that wall. They forbade them to be seen on that wall, which of course often encouraged children to do the opposite. So when they were told by their parents not to do that, of course they went right out to the wall and sat. So it became a form of rebellion for many of them. And today, since the campus has closed, the wall now is empty. So if you go Broadway any time of the day, it's completely empty. No children at all. In fact, they have a security guard that sits there to make sure nobody sits on that wall. And I have one very funny story to tell you about that. When I was dean of students, I had a student that liked to be there a lot, and her mother really was very upset that she would be seen out on that wall and that her neighbors would see her and all kinds of people would see her. So she came to me, she said, how can I get her not to hang out on the wall? I said, I'll tell you what, go down to the wall and sit there. You sit on the wall. And she did that. The kid never sat on the wall again because she said, I don't want to be seen with my mother on the wall. So that ended that whole thing. So that's the wall of Kingston High School. So that's my program for tonight. And I guess we'll do the last slide, which is thanks to the people that put this together. And I also would like to thank, I have a few thank yous. I'd like to thank Paul O'Neill and Joe Tantilla for helping me out with my PowerPoint. Kate Heidecker, who works for Kingston City Schools. She's the public relations person. She helped me put all the pictures together and all the commentary. The KHS librarian, who's Kara Haggerty, and her staff were just wonderful, because every day I would go up to the library and hang out there, and they were just wonderful in terms of giving me what I needed. Abby Fisher, who's a junior at Kingston High School, who took a lot of the pictures for me. And also Rebecca Brett, my daughter, who helped me put together a lot of the slideshow last night. And my husband, Kenneth Brett, who has put up with me and my craziness, putting this whole thing together. So thank you very much. So thank you all for coming.
Well, thank you, Anna. And do we have any questions for Anna or any anecdotes of your time at the Kingston High School?
Did you say that the wall, I didn't go to high school here, unfortunately, but did you say that the wall originally was 16 feet?
Tall, yes, yes.
Well, I'd be fascinated to know about the evolution.
How they got it.
Because it's only about 6 feet now.
Yes, yes. I don't know. I wasn't there when they did that.
I'm sure Ed will know.
Well, the wall preceded the high school by many, many years, because it was built by the O'Reilly family. and Broadway was always a problem because it was you came up the hill from down below, and then you went down the hill after you got past there, so that the wall was there for a long period. Little by little, they kept whittling the street down because the trolley cars, in the first place, when they came up the hill from the roundabout, had two horses. The horse cars did, and then they changed to one horse, and then they had a problem when they got to Broadway and by this where the high school is now. So little by little, they kept cutting the rock out down underneath there to make it the road lower, and apparently the wall suffered a little too at that time.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you, Ed. And I have to comment on that picture of Ed Ford. Did you see that handsome devil? Look at him. That was a great picture, Ed. That really was. Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, I went to Kingston High School in the late 40s, graduated from there. A couple of my brothers graduated from there. And it might have been me that moaned when I saw Mr. Culver there. We used to come from Woodstock on the bus. And there were no snow days in those days. You went, the bus driver got you to Kingston. And there was also a train that ran across Broadway at that time. And every week we'd get stuck behind a train. And we'd have to go into the vice principal's office and explain why we're late. There were 20 kids there, all got the same excuse, but that
You probably still got detention, though. I'm sure you just got.
No, we didn't get detention. We had to get a slip that let us be late into school. But that was one of my one of my experiences. A lot of others from Kingston also. That was before Rondout was built, and that was before Adiora was built. When Kingston was a lot different than it is now.
Well, it was the only school in the area, so people had to come from many, many miles to get there. Yeah. No school buses either, so. And you had a question? Who was the fourth general, Paul O'Neill? He was the one who.
The fourth general was, I believe, a cousin of Sherman Hasbrouck. I believe he was another Hasbrouck, and it's possible that maybe if Sherman Hasbrouck was part of the first graduating class out of Kingston in 1916, so it's very possible that he graduated from the academy.
From Kingston Academy.
Yeah.
I read about him, Robert Hasbrouck. And so I didn't include him because he wasn't a graduate of Kingston High School. It was before.
And Anna, I have to say, the first time I ever met Anna, I go around to the schools and speak to the kids about some of the local history. And the first time I met Anna, I went to her school. She was principal there, and I was talking to the kids. And I was talking about John Jay and how John Jay he was George Washington's first choice as Secretary of State in his first administration. And when I was explaining what the Secretary of State was to the kids, I said, the Secretary of State is really the second most important person in the United States government, more so than even the Vice President. Our current Secretary of State is Hillary Clinton. And Anna said, no, Paul, our current Secretary of State is John Kerry. And I was like, oh, okay. So this is the second time she's corrected me.
I didn't say it in front of the children.
She didn't. She waited and pulled me aside, and I don't know how I made that error, but I appreciated it. So, Robert Hasbrouck. So I guess he was from the academy. And it's funny because I was reading an article in an old magazine that I've commented on several times in our series, Old Ulster magazine, and there's an article in it was 1914, and it was discussing the history of the academy, and how it ends is that the academy building, they were moving to the new building, what became Kingston High School, and it was discussing the name, and it was very emphatic. It said, it's always been the academy, it'll always be the academy, that name will never ever change, you mark my words. Within a year it was Kingston High School. So things do change. Do we have any other questions or any other stories of some of the alumni of Kingston High School?
Mr. Reynolds?
Just to bring it full circle, what is the current student population of the school and the faculty? Do you know?
I think they have about 2,000 students now. It's gone down over the past few years because population has gone down everywhere. And I'm going to say staff is probably about between 180 to 200 faculty members. That would be teachers, and then there's auxiliary staff and teaching assistants and that kind of thing.
Any others?
Just maybe to include with the generals, Arthur Fleming, who was a graduate of high school and went on to become the, when they did a presentation here on Arthur Fleming, that's why, went on to become the Secretary of Health and Education for the United States.
Do you know when he graduated, Tom?
I don't, but I can get that for you.
22.
Yeah. It's 19, the class of 1922, and he was first appointed to his first position in the United States government by FDR.
Right, from Roosevelt through
to Reagan. He was a Republican, and he commented at the end, he said, I was appointed by a Democrat, and I was fired by a Republican. So, but, oh yeah, he was a prior subject. Also, Anne Sweeney.
Yes.
Right, she is the president of Disney TV today. She is a Kingston graduate. All right, so she was not a graduate of Kingston.
I thought she was too.
That was a test, and you all passed.
My father worked for Kingston City Schools.
He worked for Kingston. It says it's almost the same thing. It's almost the same thing.
Close enough.
Any other questions? Okay. Anna, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Anna, that was a wonderful presentation. And I have to say, I'd asked Anna if she would do this presentation a number of months ago. And I called her up after the last presentation. And this month, we're actually 1 week shorter than usual. And I said, Anna, I just want to remind you that you're the featured presenter for our lecture series this month. And she said, yep, no, I remember, but we happened to catch her at probably one of the busiest times. Anna, as I said, she is involved in everything. She is really one of the special people in our community, and I can't emphasize that enough. Anna does so much to make this the special place that it is. But she ran the Scarecrow Festival out on Frog Alley, which was a big event with Friends of Historic Kingston. She, again, was the Grand Marshal of the Snowflake Festival last weekend, so she has been all over the place. So then she has to put this together. Then I asked her if she could come on the radio this morning. So with everything else, she has to get up and come down to the radio at 7 o'clock. But it's never, there's no question. Whenever you ask Anna to do something to help out the community or help out with anyone, she drops everything and does it. So I felt at times, I was hoping I wasn't taking advantage, but she really is just a wonderful person. So Anna, thank you so much.
But my husband, who's in the audience, says, just say no. So that's what I'm going to start to say.
Brett, Ken, you just stay out of this. You let her do this. Yeah.
What was the last championship in any sport that Kingston High School won?
The question was, what is the last sports championship in Kingston High School? I don't know. Anna, do you? The question is, what is the last sports championship in any sport that Kingston High School's had?
I believe baseball. Last year they won the state championships with Gropuso, with Coach Gropuso. Wasn't it last year? Cheerleaders too. Yes, they've come out on top
And the
on a lot
band?
of things. The band, yes, which we forget about, that they have also gotten a lot of, recognition. So, yep.
Swim team. It's
Swim
an amazing
team.
place. Yeah, the band has gotten state recognition. It's been amazing. So Ken, we do thank you for being as supportive as you are. Us gentlemen need to take credit where it's due too. But Anna, thank you so much for everything. We also do want to take the opportunity to thank again all the people who make this possible. And all the people who publicize this event and make this really what it is. Hugh's made every single presentation, and he's been one of our presenters for he's got one coming up as well. So we thank him. We thank all the people, Friends of Historic Kingston, all the members of Kingston's Buried Treasures, including that handsome devil, Ed Ford. That really was a wonderful picture. And Joe Tantillo, Joe does all the work, all the graphics, the design work that really makes us look professional. We may not be, but we look it. Again, JK Wine and Liquor, they always provide the wine for this. I went down and picked it up today, and the owners are usually not there when I go in and pick it up, but today they were, and they said, tell me again what this is that you do. So we explained it, and I told them how much we appreciate it, and they said that they're going to get up here and join us for one of these. Most importantly, all of you. And, you know, when I was explaining to Anna a little bit about the audience here, this really is a communal event. I look forward to seeing everybody every month, and as I watched in the beginning, everybody is greeting each other, and everybody, I think, looks forward to seeing each other. So you make this a very, very special event. So again, we thank you for your support. Our upcoming presentations, and next month we'll be back to the third Friday of the month. January 16th, we're going to have a presentation on John Jay. The presenter is going to be Professor Ray Raymond. Those of you who have gone to the SUNY Ulster Constitutional Studies Lecture Series, Ray Raymond runs that. He's incredibly entertaining, and he spent a career in the British Diplomatic Corps. He's been a professor at West Point, at Annapolis. He's now at SUNY Ulster. He's a wonderful, wonderful speaker, and he's actually one of the national experts on John Jay, so it's going to be very interesting. And then February 20th, 2015, we're going to have a presentation on somebody that Anna talked a little bit about tonight, General Sherman Hasbrouck. General Sherman Hasbrouck is really... He was an unbelievably impressive man, and it's one of these lectures, a gentleman came up to me at the end and said, you know, Sherman Hasbrouck should be a subject. He was an incredible football player at Kingston High School. And I said, well, you know, give me a call, we'll talk about it. I don't know that we're really able to, we're looking at subjects that have done a little bit more than excelled on the Kingston football field. He said he was also a general, and he passed away a couple of years ago, but when he passed away, he was the oldest living graduate of West Point. I said, oh, well, we'll talk about it. Well, what I found out, he was also part of the Manhattan Project. After the Manhattan Project wrapped up, he ran the Atomic Commission. So he was an incredibly important individual. He actually grew up in Stone Ridge, and after his long career in the military, he came back and lived at Stone Ridge until he passed away. Our presenter for that is going to be Colonel Sherman Fleek, who is the historian for West Point. So we hope that you'll enjoy us for those. Anna, again, thank you so much. Again, the 2015 is the 100th anniversary of Kingston High School. It really is a monumental milestone. So there are going to be a number of events, I believe. If you're an alumni of Kingston High School, or if you're just interested in what's happened there, please keep an eye out for that. Anna I'm sure will be very involved in that. So again, we thank you. Have a wonderful holiday, and we'll see you in January.